All right, so like I said, welcome back to another meeting of Diverse Minds with Keisha Hamilton. I'm your host, Keisha Hamilton, a mom, an anti-racism consultant and educator, and I'm a training specialist by day, and I wear a few other hats. But for this occasion, the hat that I'm wearing tonight and each night when I come on here with you all is the one of diversity, equity, and inclusion specialist and educator consultant. So we're going to jump right in because we always want, do that because I always do. Tonight, we're talking about a scarcity mindset. So the scarcity mindset, or just, talking about the mindset of scarcity and how it impacts and affects anti-racism and diversity, equity, inclusion initiatives. How it impacts anti-racism, how it impacts and affects diversity, equity, inclusion just on their own, what scarcity does to those. So let's get right into defining our terms. We like to make sure that we have shared language, that we are all singing from the same songbook. I heard someone else say last night, but that we're all working off the same page, that we're all understanding, when a term is being used, what that term means. So what does it mean to, what does diversity, equity, and inclusion mean? Turn my ringer off, sorry about that. And anti-racism. So diversity is simply our difference. It's not just related to our skin tone, our hair texture, or the people that we choose to love. While those things are do equate to diversity, they're also sometimes superficial to the diversity that actually creates diverse atmospheres, which would be in your mindsets. So, our ideology, the reason why we think how we think, or when we're thinking a certain way, why we think that way, which relates to how we were raised, the different messages that we receive from our parents, from whatever we're watching on television, whoever we grew up around, all those messages that we received result in an ideology or a mindset. It results in why we think, how we think, it results in why we make the decisions that we make. It results in why we reason, or not reason in certain ways. That diversity is the diversity that oftentimes organizations are not looking for. They want diverse images and diverse people. So they want you to appear to look different, but they want your ideology to fit the culture of their organization, which means that they want you thinking how they think. They want you reasoning how they reason, whether or not you were raised in the same situations they were raised under. As long as your thinking still results, your decision-making still results in the upholding of their culture, then they're happy with that. And that's when you get tokenism a lot of times. That's when you get performative, efforts, when it comes to diversity, when people are not really wanting true diversity. And that is when a person who thinks completely different than you, reasons completely different than you, then you bring that person in and say, okay, now let's dialogue, let's consult with one another, let's create with one another. The product is going to be different. It's going to be more inclusive because one, you've got somebody different in there. It's going to be more reflective of society. It actually is better for business, but oftentimes a scarcity mindset, which again, we're talking about today, and we'll get to that a little bit later, it resists that because it also has this idea that if I actually include other mindsets, then that means that mine won't be dominant. And that's true, which is also why it's often resisted. But anyways, the diversity that we like to recognize on a meeting of Diverse Minds with Keisha Hamilton is the diversity of thought that we want to, encourage each other to have and use and accept and embrace. So that's the diversity that we're talking about, that kind of diversity, when we actually have different mindsets because of different ways that we've been raised, and we can bring those together to create something beautiful. What is equity? Equity is an acknowledgement and an awareness of barriers and disparities that exist, and then an effort towards eliminating those. So it's kind of two-part, and we talked about this numerous times, and you all know that equity is my thing. I love equity. To me, I know for a fact that nothing that we do, unless we are doing it through equity, we're not doing it correctly or right. So, but equity is acknowledging, looking at, so you have to have some awareness, you got to have some knowledge, you got to have some education around whatever it is that you're looking at. You can't recognize barriers that you don't know exist. You can't recognize disparities that you're uneducated on. A lot of individuals live in, these small communities, or just these, communities that look just like themselves. And that's all they lived in their entire lives. And so they have no idea what happens in other communities. And so when another idea or other, circumstances presented to them, because they don't understand it, they have no clue about what it is. When that other person from a different community says, hey, I need ... in order to be successful, in order for me to, live appropriately, because this person in this community never experienced that, doesn't know anything about that, they look at this other person as a threat. Like, you're trying to take something from me to have what you say you need, but do you really need it? Then we get all those questions of, do you really need it? Have you really done, all this ways of trying to hinder or stop other people from getting those things that they need, because again, a lack of awareness, a lack of acknowledgement, and inequity. When you're talking about true equity, then you have people who are aware, who are able to acknowledge, and who say, because you need this, I'm going to give you that to succeed. So the example that we always give, is that, you all know I have 6 children, 4 girls and 2 boys. I have older girls and I have younger girls. My children are separated in sets of 2s. I have 2 girls, 2 boys, 2 girls. And my older girls, they don't need the same things that my younger girls need in order to succeed, right? They don't, so my older girl, my oldest daughter, she wants to talk about, as I mentioned before, houses and credit and jobs and how to get along with her, her coworkers and, different things that she should take for a potluck, you know what I mean? Whereas my baby, my 7-year-old, she's 8 now, she just turned 8 this month. She wants to talk about, Mom, how can I butter you up so I can sleep with you tonight? You know what I mean? She likes to sleep with her mom. Well, if I give my oldest daughter what my youngest daughter is requesting, I'm not giving my oldest daughter what she needs to succeed. She needs information on how to live life as a young adult at this age. You know what I mean? So telling my oldest child, you can sleep with me at night, and that should satisfy your need so that you can be successful, would be unfair to her. And it wouldn't help her. You know what I mean? Same thing for my youngest daughter, talking to her about, how to get along with her coworkers, which she doesn't have any, unless you want to equate those to her classmates in school once she starts going back this month. It's not going to help her. You know what I mean? Talking to her about, houses and credit, is going to keep her, she can be a little clueless on that. And that's not going to fulfill that need that she has, at least she thinks the need is, to sleep with me. You know what I mean? So equity is definitely personalized. It's the key to all things anti-racism, diversity, equity, and inclusion. It's the key. A lot of these diversity, equity, inclusion, anti-racism, initiatives that people are, creating and belonging, they've added that word in there. They fail to talk about and include equity. So a lot of them are just diversity and inclusion, and belonging. You're not getting anything actual, correct, or right, or true, or authentic, or to fidelity without equity. Equity is everything. It's what tells us we've got to personalize this. It has to be personalized, it just has to be personalized. Any of you who have children or even pets, some of you all can maybe relate to, equity when it comes to pets. You might have a cat and a dog. You can't feed your cat and your dog the same thing. That would be equality. I'm giving you both food. It might be all cat food, but it is food. You should just accept it because I've done. No, you haven't. You have not done what you needed to do so these 2 animals can be successful. You know what I mean? Your dog might need to go on walks and your cat doesn't. You can't take your cat on a walk and not your dog and think that you've been equitable. You know what I mean? You got to give what this person, this animal, this, situation needs in order for it to succeed. And that is personalized. Like I said, equity is everything. And I could always spend a lot of time on equity, but I won't, because I want to get to scarcity tonight. So what is inclusion? Inclusion is having a seat at the table. And not only being at the table, we've talked about the Tea Party idea that oftentimes that's what actually results today when we're trying to be inclusive in anything, you know what I mean? When it comes to, employers and churches and, organizations who are saying we want to be inclusive. So it's the idea that you put a bunch of teddy bears around the table, the 5 or 6 year old, little girl or, person wants to have dinner with their teddy bears. Everybody's sitting around the table. The teddy bears are just there. They have no contribution. They're not smiling. They're not contributing. They're not eating. They're just there as props, basically, which is totally fun. Good games for 5 or 6 or 4, 3-year-old little girls. It's a different story when you're talking about organizations who are saying that we're going to be inclusive and you're bringing Black and brown individuals. One thing I think that, I think I've made this clear before, but I'm just going to say it again. Anti-racism, diversity, equity, inclusion, while Black and brown people can get a lot out of understanding what those things are, how they impact their lives, and how they need to continue to move forward in life to ensure that they get more of those things, it's for white people. It's for white dominant culture. Okay, that's what it's for. The people who have been left out are not white dominant culture. They're the people who are leaving everyone out. And what I mean by leaving out as in excluding. So this teaching, while Black and brown individuals need to be very intentional about understanding what these things are so that they can move and make decisions based off of ensuring that we get more of these things, white dominant culture needs this information. So clearly this space is for everybody. I'm always incredibly grateful when Black or brown individuals, say to me, I've learned so much, keep doing what you're doing. Or just find a space in a meeting of Diverse Minds with Keisha Hamilton where they're saying right on, basically, like, yes, that's everything you're saying is correct. I always greatly appreciate that, just so we're clear. But when we're talking to this, I'm talking to my people, Black and brown folks, but I'm also talking to white folks and say, hey, listen, this is for you. You also, more importantly, you more than anybody, really need to understand what true diversity is, what true equity is, what true inclusion is, because we need to make the spaces that you all occupy actually diverse, actually equitable, and actually inclusive. And that doesn't look like me coming as a Black woman or as a, any other minority or ethnic person or minority group coming to your spaces and sitting around the table like a teddy bear. That's not inclusion. Inclusion is where all those people who are impacted by whatever we're creating. So say we're creating a policy, and I've given this example before on, what type of times do we need to create for people to take off? So should we have maternity leave, paternity leave? What kind of leaves should we create besides vacation and sick leave? You know what I mean? Well, you need to have everybody that's impacted by that leave, that time at the table. So moms need to be there. Older moms, young moms with older children, moms with younger children, because moms with older children sometimes have grandbabies, or they sometimes also have smaller children as well. But new moms need to be there. Dads need to be at the table. You know what I mean? Grandparents need to be at the table. Different communities need to be at the table, because not every mom or parent in this community parents like this community. So understanding the needs around these community, which includes, holidays, which includes birthday celebrations, how they are done or not done, religion, how that's done or not done in any community, and how that impacts what type of needs need to be accounted for and created in our leave policy. They all need to be at the table. If you are bringing, one Black person to the table, who looks like a Black person, but whose thought processes are not diverse, what you create won't really be something that is inclusion. It won't be inclusion, because inclusion is ensuring that I'm there at the table and that what I'm contributing is implemented in whatever is created. So we're taking yours, mine, all these, and we're putting it all together, and we're creating something that looks like everybody that's at the table. You can't have that if you are bringing people to the table who look different than you, but who think exactly like you, or people who are all just like you. That's not inclusion. And that inclusion can be adapted to to everything, to so many different things, and how we are you actually being inclusive of people? You can use that in education. You can use that in your employment. You can use that as employees, like you can use that in churches. Understanding the need to ensure that those who are impacted by whatever is being created, that they are the voices that are heard, considered, and incorporated is important. Many of you know I've become a board member, and thank God I won. But with that, my motto at the time was, those closest to the problem are closest to the solution, but often furthest from the resources and power. And I get that from Just Leadership USA. It's a leadership organization that I'm also fortunate to be a fellow in. But anyways, though, those closest to the problem are closest to the solution. So when we're talking about inclusion, if you have no one who's closest to the issue of, different types of leaves that might need to be created in your policy, if they're not at the table, then whatever you're creating, it's going to be exclusive to those who weren't at the table, and only servicing a few people, those who were at the table, and then everybody who comes in after, to your organization and needs to take off time for different things that were not thought of in that process. Now they all have a problem. And of course, it's always on them and not on us, those that, sat around that table and created. And yet, then you have, a group of people who are constantly coming and going, this revolving door in your organizations, your churches, your relationships, your religion, a revolving door of people who are coming and going, because they can't stay there, because what's been created doesn't reflect them, doesn't help them. It actually hinders them. Inclusion is very important, people. Okay, let's go on to racism. I'm going to move a little fast here because I want to get to our topic for tonight, and I'm going to keep us on schedule. So what is racism? Racism is the marginalization or oppression of people of color based on socially constructed and hierarchical, I always mess up hierarchy and hierarchical, I always mess that up. But anyway, so based on hierarchy, which is just, somebody here, that's the hierarchy. That privileges racism, these things, this marginalization, this oppression, this socially constructed process, it privileges white people. It privileges white dominant culture. Okay, that's what racism is. It also, the most important part of it, or the second most important part of it, is that it is coupled with power. Okay, so it's different from discrimination in that it's coupled with power. It's codified in our laws, which direct our policies, which direct our practices, which direct our laws, our ramifications of those laws. So, if you do something that is against the law, now everything, the way that you are reprimanded for that, it's in the law that you get to be, that they can reprimand you for that, as opposed to discrimination, which is not coupled per se with power. Racism also impacts large groups of people, and you can, statistically see its impact in different places. Now, discrimination is very similar to racism, up to the point that it does not possess the same amount of power that racism has. So I've said this before, and I say it again because it's very important for us to hear. White dominant culture are the only people who can be racist because they hold that power. That's why they can only be the ones who are racist. Can Black and brown individuals operate through discrimination? 100%. Again, discrimination and racism look very similar until you get to the point of power, which makes racism what it is and discrimination what it is, and separates the two. So yes, we are humans. We all can be, we all can operate through discrimination and discriminatory practices, but we can't all be racist. I'm gonna keep going because, again, I wanna move on. But what is anti-racism? So, we've added that term in, and I've talked about this before, the need for us to add in the terms anti-racism. What white dominant culture is very good at doing is adapting itself so that it always maintains its space of power. So in its adaptation, of itself in society, you'll find many diversity, equity, and inclusion specialists and managers and officers and these tables who are talking diversity, equity, inclusion that have all white people around it who have absolutely no clue what actual diversity is or inclusion, because of course they've never been excluded, so they have no idea what they're talking about, and yet they're the heads of all these things. And everything that you're getting, the product that we're getting from that, is a very white dominant culture product, and it looks nothing like what true diversity, equity, inclusion is, because again, white dominant culture and white supremacy, those things, they are very good at adapting. So we've added anti-racism in there because we have to keep adapting. We just have to keep adapting. So what is anti-racism? It's just the opposite of racism, in the fact that it is very intentional about fighting against racism. Okay, so you have to have an awareness of what racism is. You've got to have historical knowledge of what racism actually is. You've got to know how those things play out. You've got to be able to recognize how race impacts and affects almost everything that people of color deal with, from a white dominant culture. Almost everything. I'm gonna have to think of something that isn't impacted by race, and when I find it, I'll tell you. It's not going to be tonight, because almost everything. I don't know that there's anything that isn't impacted by race. Anyways, though, so anti-racism is simply just an intention and an activity, so an active intention to dismantle and destroy racism, stand against it, call it out, and pull it down. Allies, I like to talk about that. Allies are those individuals who are reading, learning, looking, watching shows like mine. Please continue to invite your family members and your friends to, who are educating themselves. Accomplices are who we want our allies to become, because accomplices are these individuals who, are ready to get their hands dirty, who, are making space in the room for Black and Brown voices, recognizing that as an ally, their position is that of making space, but not to take over. So those are accomplices. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on that because I have before, and I want to get on. I'm at my 30-minute mark, and I want to get to my other topic for tonight. So as we talk about scarcity, anti-racism, and diversity, equity, and inclusion, and you all know that I will say DEI, and that relates to diversity, D, equity, E, and inclusion, I. We need to define scarcity. What does it mean? So scarcity, what is it? You can Google it. It's all this stuff that I talk about is easily found on Google, and with a little bit of research, or a lived experience, which some of us have, and some of us fortunately don't. Honestly, fortunately you don't. But anyway, so scarcity is the scarcity mindset. It is just a mindset. It's a way of thinking. It's often subconscious. I don't know that anybody naturally is aware that their decisions and their thought processes are based on a scarcity mindset. I think it's subconscious. But it's the idea, it's the mindset that I need to hoard or secure and amass. I need to get all, I need to get all of these things. I need to stockpile. I need to preserve and reserve and hold for myself, because there's not enough to go around. That's scarcity. It's this idea that there's not enough to go around, and so I have to do everything in my power to ensure that that I have enough. Now, scarcity, the scarcity mindset is kind of it's not a critical thinking mindset. It's not a reasonable, it's not a reasoning mindset. It's very selfish. And again, I believe that oftentimes people are this is a subconscious mindset that they're not fully aware that they are operating with and through. So when the pandemic hit in March of 2020, we saw the scarcity mindset take over. All of a sudden, grocery shelves were being empty. Baby formula was being bought up by the box loads. Like, I don't know if anybody watching, if you have a baby and you've ever fed them on formula. I breastfed all my children, but I do have friends. I have several friends who did breastfeed, and those cans can be like $30 a can. And, these things are being bought during that time frame by the, by the boxes, so six in a box maybe or something, you know what I mean? Because this idea when the pandemic hit that all of a sudden there's not going to be enough. I still don't even understand where that thought process came from. So the idea that, okay, you got to quarantine for some time. And so you need to have enough during that quarantine. That makes sense to me. Get enough to last for 2 or 4 weeks. That makes sense. You know what I mean? But people weren't just buying enough for 2 or 4 weeks. They weren't even necessarily having to quarantine in the way that, like they couldn't get to the store. When I say, I was like trying to buy tissue myself, because, generally you run out of tissue after a while, especially with a family of, my size, we run out of tissue after a while. And I went to the store. I buy it in bulk because I do have a big family and I just always buy it in bulk. Went to the store to get it from Sam's, and Sam's is like completely cleaned out. And I'm just like, wow, cleaned out. So I said, well, I'll go ahead and order it because I'm also this person that likes to have a little bit ahead. I do like to have some where I don't run out. I like to have a couple rows stocked up. I do. But anyways, so I went to order it and there was none to be ordered. And I'm like, you mean to tell me we don't have any in the store or nor can we order any? What are they doing with tissue? What are you doing with the tissue? And I'm sure we all were asking that question at that time, like what are we doing with the tissue, But anyways, so like I said, so disinfectant, they had to start rationing out disinfectant and tissue boxes. You can only buy so many, because people were just hoarding it. People were, just going crazy with this idea that, if I don't get it before you do, I'm not going to have. Mind you, their closets are full of tissue and whatever else they need, but I still need to get more because of whatever reason, you know what I mean? So we see this scarcity mindset as a guide in some people when they're making their decisions. So, and any of us who are not billionaires or even millionaires, and who work these jobs, some of us are, what's the term that we use for, our first responders and, our grocery store clerks, these people who are essential, that's what it is. Our essential workers, even restaurant, those who work in restaurants and work in fast food, these are essential people, any of us who work in the healthcare field, you know what I mean? Especially our CNAs and our nurses, work in these fields that, really became, really the pandemic showed how important they are. Yet a scarcity mindset has us making this decision that no longer, I'm not going to pay you prior to pre-COVID. And even now they're still fighting about it. But prior to COVID, different ones were saying we need at least a minimum wage to survive. Take the minimum wage to at least $15 so we can survive. And I'm talking about Midwest areas where we can more so survive than these bigger cities or like the East Coast, New York or something like that, where you need the cost of living is much different. So you need even more than $15 to survive, you know what I mean? But even just that small amount that individuals were asking for, the scarcity mindset, these big corporations, any big fast food like McDonald's, like they could probably easily pay, because they're so big and so far and so everywhere, they could probably easily pay all of their employees $20 an hour, the starting rate. They could, easily pay them $20 an hour, and their employees, probably give them health insurance, and time off and paid leave and whatever else. They could actually have a decent job if we didn't have this scarcity mindset that, if you take from my billions, then I'm not going to have it. That's why I say a scarcity mindset. It's not very reasonable. No one person is going to spend $1 billion on themselves in their lifetime. No one person, that they need to, and that's endless vacations and endless family trips, for a family of 4, because, a lot of billionaires probably don't have a lot of children. No one person is going to spend who's a billionaire or even a millionaire, like no one person reasonably spending money needs to amass or hoard that kind of income and wealth from their employees. And yet they do all the time because of a scarcity mindset. Okay. It's because of a scarcity mindset, this idea that if I give you what I have, then I'm going to have less. You will, but you also are not taking from anything that you need either. You're taking from your abundance. You know what I mean? But scarcity mindsets don't think that way. That, like I said, those are the grocery store chains. Walmart could easily be paying they could be, the starting wage could be $20 an hour, from what they're, because of what they bring in and what they're hoarding and what they're amassing and sitting to the side and saying, this is for us and that little bit's for you all. And I can't pay you anymore. Like, really? Where they do that at? Well, they do that in spaces that, embrace a scarcity mindset. This idea that, if you take from me, if you take from my abundance, I'm not going to have, I won't have enough. You know what I mean? So these are your credit unions. This is it. So any of our big business credit unions, banks, churches who are, whose pastors are like, why do you need an airplane, pastor? You need an airplane? You know what I mean? But we have our, some churches where, these mega churches where these pastors can afford an airplane, and yet they have parishioners who can't pay their bills, at times because they're, this scarcity mindset that the pastor has, that, you give me more so I can just have enough. So, I mean, that's what I can have, so I can amass so much. Okay. But again, we can't share what we've taken because we'll have less. Okay. And that's a part of the scarcity mindset, this idea that we can't share what we've taken. So we know that America and Americans, America was founded on land that was not its own, and it's never been given back to the people who whose land it actually is. I was fortunate today to be listening to a Native American gentleman on DEI today. I listen to this stuff all the time and watch it all the time. But anyway, so in there, he was talking about how Native Americans don't consider the land as a possession, like it's a possession. They consider the land as if it's something that to be stewarded, to be taken care of, to be cultivated, you know what I mean? As opposed to how we in America have been taught to think about it, as in the more land you have, the more wealthy you are, the more prestige and honor you should have because you have so much more of it. This idea in American culture, when it comes to scarcity with land, we can't give back to us because that's what it would be, should we, and if we ever gave it back to us as a society, and began to think of it like Native Americans do, how are we all stewarding our land? You know what I mean? But we can't ever get there because, scarcity mindset says to hoard it, to, keep it all for yourself because I don't know what, you know what I mean? But that's what it does. Scarcity mindset is definitely a byproduct of white dominant culture. You've heard these things, and we even applaud this, only the strong survive. We look at a person's name and say, how many accomplishments did you get? How many letters behind your name do you have? Who did you beat out? Which competition did you? And while some of these things are not necessarily bad, the result and the impact of it and the effect of those things, even if on the surface they're not bad, we need to look at those things and then consider, what are they? Where do they come from? Much of it's from this scarcity mindset that, I need to amass all the wealth. I need to amass all the this came out with Simone Biles and Naomi Osaka. This idea that, you work for us, you know what I mean? You don't matter as a person to us. We need you to get out there and just get that goal for Team USA. Like, huh? So just kill myself, or break a bone, or there's a gymnast, and I forget her name, a white gymnast, who I think in the 80s or late, she might have been mid 90s. She kept going and performing through the Olympics, and she was hurt. And you all can look her up, look her up, and I'll have to figure out her name and put her in the comments later. But she kept performing, even though she was incredibly hurt. I think she had some type of torn ligament or something in her leg. Anyways, though, she performed, and then she, at the end of her performance, she came down and landed wrong. I think she landed on her chin, and she became a quadriplegic, whichever one was you're paralyzed from the neck down. She became a quadriplegic, I think, at the age of 24. because this idea that, you just keep going no matter what. It doesn't matter how you're feeling or how you're thinking or what your body is saying or what you recognize that you can or can't do. You just keep going because we need to bring that gold home. Scarcity mindset is very selfish in its nature. It's that white dominant culture, the strong survive. You get that for us. We gotta have the gold. Why we gotta have the gold? Why is the silver not an accomplishment? Why is not the fact that you made it to the Olympics an accomplishment? How is that not an accomplishment? You know what I mean? How is that not an accomplishment? And yet in scarcity mindset, because there's no reasoning in it, no ability for it to, critically think about what matters, your health, your wellness as an individual, or me being able to have a statue or be able to write it on the wall that Team USA took the gold in 2021 on a wall that people are never going to see, don't really pay attention to, and only matter every 4 years when the Olympics come up again. You know what I mean? But scarcity mindset just thinks that way. It doesn't care about other people. It's very selfish in that way. This idea with the scarcity mindset is this idea that, if you gain something, then that means I lose. Why do we automatically think that? And it breeds these things when it comes to, girls in these beauty pageants and nothing against, again, some of these things can have some decent elements to them. They can teach some good skills to our people. Even sports, they teach some good things to our children and things like that. But when we think about, even this competition between the two, if because you got, you made queen, that means that I'm ugly. Just because you won a popularity contest don't mean that your differences in your physical features make either one of you better or worse. Just because you're thicker or smaller or taller or shorter, or smarter, more adept in this area or more adept in that area, doesn't mean that there's anything less about me. But yet, in a scarcity mindset, that's how we view things. They won the top, so that means I'm no longer. No, that's not true. They won in this way, but that doesn't mean that, and they won by oftentimes, by a set of individuals who are all taught to think a certain way, taught to, and have accepted that ideology and therefore continue to keep that culture going. You know what I mean? But, we don't often consider that when we think through a scarcity mindset or when we choose, to continue in that culture. So it's this idea that if I share power with you, so when we're talking about scarcity mindset, it comes to anti-racism, diversity, equity, and inclusion. This idea that if I share power with you, then I'm going to lose something. You know what I mean? So it's really interesting because even when we think about, the decisions that we're making, we would rather continue making the same decision, having the same result from that decision, tweaking that decision, not enough to change any of the essence of that decision, rather than actually make a true change because we think we're going to lose power. For example, in law enforcement, our community has a lot of gun violence in it, sadly. But law enforcement's answer to that, one, is not to ask the people who are involved in a community that experiences gun violence, which is their first, scarcity mindset. We can't ask you how to fix the problem. We can't include you in that creation. And if we do, we're not listening to anything you say, because taking your opinion, taking your lived experience, taking your knowledge and actually using it, allowing you, community, to lead that change and to guide it, which actually would then would result in change, would mean that we're no longer guiding and directing that. Which means that we don't have the power anymore. And so rather than giving you and allowing you to lead the change that needs to happen in your community, rather than allowing that to occur and us to lose power, our say so in the manner, we would rather just keep doing what we're doing, which is not helping the problem, which is not solving crime, which is actually being a menace to society. Yes, law enforcement are actually a menace to African American and Black folks, our society. We'd rather continue that than lose our power. this idea that's, because we're going to lose, and like, if the objective is to ensure that we no longer have, an issue with gun violence, why aren't we seeking to solve that objective regardless to who's in the position of authority? But again, scarcity mindset doesn't think like that. It just thinks I'm going to lose, and in order for me not to lose, I'm just going to do whatever I can to make sure that I don't lose, regardless to the impact of anybody else. I just got to make sure I keep mine. It's a very selfish mindset. If I succeed, then if you succeed, then that means I lose. Why does it have to be an either or? Why does it have to be that, if I get mine, then you're not going to get yours? Why can't it be us both getting ours together? Why does it have to be that way? You know what I mean? So an example that I thought of with this, when it comes to, if I get mine, if I take care of your need, then my need is not going to be met. So many people, especially when it comes to diversity, equity, inclusion, this is why a lot of white dominant culture embracing individuals, are so intent about, tweaking DEI and anti-racism so that it doesn't actually change anything, is because they believe that if your need gets met, then that means I won't have my need met. Which is incredibly sad, because it's so untrue. The idea that, they might say, well, one of the things that I'm talk about a lot in the space that I'm in, different spaces I'm in, is that we need representation. We need our students to see Black and brown teachers who look like them. You need to be able to see yourself if you believe that, so that you can know that it's possible, so that you can know that you can become this one day. Well, a lot of times our scarcity mindset, white dominant culture, well, if I give, this job to this person, then that person isn't going to get it. Correct. They're not going to get it. But how many other of that same person do you see in this space, already? Will these children actually miss out? White children, will white children actually miss out on anything if you hire 20 or 30 Black people? When you consider that you have 250 white people here working for them, are they going to miss out? And yet dominant culture, dominant culture, the white scarcity mindset, the reasoning in it says that, yeah, that's a problem. And you're 100% correct, Maisha. Having a Black principal, it's not the same. It's not enough. It's not enough, and it's not the same as having a student talking directly to this teacher every single day for a semester, or for 3 semesters, or for 2 trimesters, I think is how we do it now. You know what I mean? But scarcity mindset, this idea that if I fulfill this need that Black and brown students have, to have an interpreter, to have books that are written in, our dual language books, so that our ESL learners can, have both side by side as they're trying to learn the language and learn the content as well. There's something going to be missed if I provide that for you. What's missed in helping? But this is not new. This is not new. We know that during slavery times, one of the biggest crimes that a Black person could commit would be to educate themselves, would be to learn how to read. You could die, during slavery times and after, which is why they still underfund our school, which is why they still underfund, programming that would help Black and brown students succeed. This idea that if you learn all this information, if you educate yourself, then you're going to start taking from me. Why wouldn't we want an educated society? What would it? We don't know what an educated society would look like, because we've never had it. We've never encouraged that. What might an educated society look like if that were something that we focused on, that we prioritized? The education of all, the complete education of all. If we prioritize, talents and skills, what might our world look like if that were our talent? But because scarcity says, if I give you what you need, then that means it's taken from me. I won't give you that, despite what it might create, despite the fact that my grandparents may not have died, not mine, but a lot of white people have people in their families who die from cancer. Despite the fact that I might have my family still living and alive today because cancer would have been solved because we have an educated society. The scarcity mindset is okay with harming itself as long as you don't get yours. We saw that with Obamacare. You know, a lot of white people now, this, you know, we don't talk a lot about classism, but we'll get into that soon. Racism and classism and how those things interplay on each other. But a lot of white people, a lot of poor white people, you know, would not vote for Obamacare because it was Obamacare. A Black man did that. Despite the fact that they needed the health care, they needed the medicine, they needed the lower rates, that because a Black man did it, I'm not gonna vote for it. Like, but that's voting against your own interest. Scarcity mindset does that. I would rather hurt and be harmed than make sure that you and all of us get what we need. That's scarcity mindset. And scarcity mindset acts like that when it comes to, you know, to anything, but especially when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion. It would rather suffer, it would rather not have than, you know, than ensure that you get what you need, which again, when ensuring that you get what you need, they would be missing out on absolutely nothing. And yet scarcity mindset acts like that. And you're gonna see this as you're working on your diversity, equity, inclusion initiatives. You'll get this resistance comes from a scarcity mindset. You know, this idea that it worked in the past and therefore it's gonna work today. Who did it work for in the past? It's not even working for you. And white people, white dominant culture, because they have told themselves the lie and they sold themselves the lie and they believe the lie that, you know, that what they've created is actually good, and primarily because they just don't acknowledge what has been created. They don't acknowledge that, you know, not only are my people, white folks, your people are dying, your families are broken, you know, your homes are, you know, perverted in different ways, you know, your children are unhappy, you know, your old people are in, you know, your elders are in community homes, and you know, these you know, what are the homes that people work in? My daughter worked in a senior home. What's the homes that the seniors work in? Y'all figure it out, tell me. But you know, all your families are away in these spaces, not with you. You know, your children are blowing up and shooting up school buildings. Like, you know, your women are being raped and you're baked. Like, the idea that you won't pay attention to what your scarcity mindset has created just because that means you got to get what you need. And in my mind, that means I'm not going to get what I need, or I won't be able to keep what I have, and it won't look the same. And so I would rather deny you that and keep this broken, rotted, you know, existence that I have. That's scarcity mindset. That's incredibly scary, but it is what we are wrestling against every day when we're talking about diversity, equity, inclusion, anti-racism. You know, when we have to have conversations, you know, about how do we take care of, you know, those who are vulnerable? How do we take care of the most vulnerable? You know what I mean? We have to have those conversations at times, and oftentimes it is thrown into this arena of that's a political conversation, so we can't have it. No, that's a human conversation. We're talking about human beings who are experiencing hardships, and you won't address it, because to address their hardship means that you would have to fulfill their need. And in your mind, taking from, you know, your abundance means that you're suffering. And yet scarcity mindset thinks like that. It's like I said, it's unreasonable. There's no critical thinking in scarcity mindset. There's just none. But that should not be surprising, because in our country, we don't think through critical thought. We choose not to. So much so that critical race theory, which take out the race and just say critical theory, we resist critical thinking, which is incredibly weird to me. Like, why would we do that? But we do. So it's no surprise that in scarcity mindset, that individuals would be resistant to, you know, thinking critically about what the need is, the fact that you're taking it from your abundance, and the fact that it's not, that you're losing absolutely nothing in order to fulfill that need. Okay. Scarcity mindset, the last thing I'm going to say about it tonight is that scarcity mindset, it doesn't have to make sense. Like I said, it does not use reason. There's no facts when it comes to scarcity mindset. And it is so committed to itself that it will do anything and whatever to maintain its position. Okay, so when we're talking about diversity, equity, inclusion, one of the benefits that you all have when you are having a conversation with me on a meeting of diverse minds with Keisha Hamilton is that I generally don't sugarcoat anything, and I'm not working for anyone to, I'm not here to make you feel good. I'm not here to make you feel bad. I'm here to give you facts, historical knowledge, authentic engagement, and I'm here to see that we actually make some changes. In scarcity thinking and scarcity mindset, they don't want the actual facts and actual truth, because maintaining it is more important to them than anything else. And so in that thinking, again, as we gave with the Obamacare example, they will work against themselves, against their families, against their own best interests in order to stay in a position of authority. That's scarcity mindset. Now, abundance mindset is the other mindset that you can explore more of. You'll see that if you do scarcity versus abundance, which is definitely where we want people to end up at, where you recognize that, taking care of you means I'm taking care of me. You know what I mean? The fact that we are interdependent human beings, the fact that, as a human being, some kind of way, and we know, whichever deity or, higher power you do or don't acknowledge, you recognize that, looks like I am interrupted. Give me a minute. Okay, it looks like I'm back. You recognize, that as a human being, you need to be around other people at times. Okay. Now, some of us like to be around other people more than others. And, some of us like to be around other people a lot less. If nothing else, the pandemic showed us how much we value interaction with one another, even as introverts. How much we value one another, how much we need that, how impactful it is to us not to have it. The pandemic also showed us that. This awareness and acknowledgement that people need other people, what seems like it would say to us that if I get my needs met and you get your needs met, then we have a needs met community, and we have a healthy community. You know what I mean? Just the awareness that, I can't exist on my own successfully. And like I said, the pandemic showed us that, to some of those who needed to know that, I can't get my groceries without other people. I can't get my gas without other people. I can't, get my seed without, if it didn't show us anything else, it should have shown us how much we need each other. And yet and still, scarcity mindset people who are still, fully committed to that perspective would still feel like, if you get yours, that means I'm not going to get mine. And I would rather neither of us get it. Like, we all got to die just because, because you just don't want to share. Anyways, so that's scarcity mindset for tonight. I want you all to just to be aware of that, to be aware, to be able to call that out, to be able to recognize where it's coming from yourself. Because oftentimes, again, none of us living today created racism and the impacts of it, yet we all do live under it. And we all do have a responsibility to, to dismantle those things. But you can't dismantle what you don't recognize. You can't change in yourself what you don't recognize, and having conversations on these things helps us to see how we might be thinking that way or how we might be making decisions in that way. And then it helps us to change those things. Thank you all so much for coming for another meeting of Diverse Minds with Keisha Hamilton here on August 18th. I missed you. I'm glad you all are back. Feel free, I don't know if you all have seen it or not, but I do finally have my website up and it looks amazing. www.diversemindsconsulting, DIVERSEMINDS consulting, CONSULTING.com, diversemindsconsulting.com. Check it out. I do offer services on there for I charge for those things. This is my free time with you all, but feel free to check it out. I'm excited about the website, but I will be back with you all next week. Next week, school is starting. So I may or may not be able to get on Wednesday. I'm not sure what's going to be happening with my children. I may have to shift my days around. I'm a mom to 6. I have 4 babies who are still in school, but a meeting of Diverse Minds with Keisha Hamilton will continue weekly. Check me out for next week, Wednesday. If it's not Wednesday, I'll make an announcement. But I appreciate you all for joining me. Like and share these videos, send them to your family members and friends, and I will see you next week. Okay, bye.